Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema Podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle and thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com as well as the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. You can check out the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Hit subscribe, rate, and review, whether it's Apple, Google, Spotify, Good Pods, pretty much any podcast platforms is where you'll find us. But the YouTube channel, you will also get exclusive quick take video reviews that I will post every once in a while. If there's a movie that I don't necessarily feel like doing a longer review about, but I do want to say something about, you can find those at the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. You can also check us out at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. There you will find series like Leaving the Collection, Life Soundtrack, my annual Oscar nominations discussions, as well as film festival coverage like short film block reviews and excerpts from Q&As. That is at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. We're going to be going a little bit back to the Oscars to a certain extent, but we're going to be going back to one particular actor's history in the terms of the Academy Awards, and that is one of the great legends of the golden age of Hollywood, Barbara Stanwyck. Join me to talk about Barbara Stanwyck is a film critic and whom I've known a couple of years online through Twitter, and this is their first time on the podcast, Matthew St. Clair. Matthew, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
This being your first time on the podcast, I wanted to do a quick introduction of where people can find you online, and also what was it that inspired you to start writing about movies?
Yeah, sure. As for my socials, you can find me on Twitter at FilmGuy619, and as for my writing, I primarily do reviews on Awards Watch and the Film Experience, and with my writing being still being sort of all over the place on places like Polygon, Little White Lies, Den of Geek, and I also have my own newsletter, my own Substack called Cinematic Words of a Chaotic Gemini, where I basically do my own ramblings about the world of cinema, especially with the Oscars. As for what got me into writing about movies, originally I wanted to be a screenwriter, but then when I started my own blog, I realized that film criticism I don't know why exactly, but film criticism just is something that I ended up sticking with and became a passion of mine.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there, to a certain extent, I do think there is some truth to the idea that film critics are people who did at one point want to do filmmaking. I mean, I know I've certainly dabbled in filmmaking myself, so I mean, I understand that, but I think I think that kind of goes more towards us being so interested in the art of filmmaking. We're not just content watching it. We want to actually make it. We want to actually explore the idea of making a film. Is that sort of where your inspiration, part of your evolution from screenwriter to film critic kind of came from?
I'm not sure, but I do as I'm writing. It is part of our job as film critics, but I do get a thrill out of dissecting the different elements as I'm watching a movie, like the cinematography and how the symbolism behind that, and I always love talking about performances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. And we'll actually go ahead and start into the main subject, because this was I gave you the opportunity to bring a topic that you wanted to talk about on the podcast, and I know when you first brought up the idea of talking about Barbara Stanwyck, especially her Oscar-nominated work, I got really excited, especially when I went and looked at what movies we would be discussing today. Three of them I had not seen. The fourth one, Double Indemnity, I've seen it a couple of times, and is one of the more famous film noirs out there. What is it about um, Barbara Stanwyck that made you want to talk about her?
Well, I've been wanting to just go on a podcast in general to talk about classic cinema,
Mm-hmm.
as I myself have got since because I myself have gotten more in deep in classic cinema and exploring the work of the golden movie stars from the golden age of cinema, as you said, and Barbara Stanwyck. I went with Barbara Stanwyck because I'm just someone she's someone whose versatility I'm in such awe of. Like even her nominations are each from a different genre.
Yeah.
All the different her different nominations are a true testament to her strength. How she's done, she can do melodramas, screwball comedies, psychological thriller. And I even just the other day I watched Lady of Burlesque, which was a musical crime comedy. Like she could do it all.
Yeah. No, and that was one of the things that got me so excited when it came to finally starting to watch some of the movies I had not seen of hers, is because of the fact that all of these movies really do represent a big range for an actor. Like you said, I mean, we see comedy, we see film noir, we see psychological thrillers, we see drama and melodrama, and I love, and sometimes all at once, sometimes in one individual performance, sometimes spread out between the four performances. And it's like you were talking about you were talking about classic sim. I mean, it's funny because this podcast has nominally become a a film history podcast in a lot of ways. We deal a lot with past films in over here on Sonic Cinema, and so that was part of the reason why I was so excited, because of the fact that it's like, oh well, this fits perfectly with what the podcast is right now. But it was also the fact that, okay, these are three performances, these are three movies at least that I have not had a chance to see yet, and a fourth one that is a legitimately great one that I really would love to talk about, because it's just a great example. Although we actually have two of these films have Billy Wilder's part of it, and we'll get into that as we get into the individual films. Um, who are apart from Stanwyck, who are some of the other, as you've gone into Hollywood's golden age, who are some of the other actors that you find yourself drawn to?
Joan Crawford, who was a master at reinventing herself.
Mm-hmm.
Katharine Hepburn, Deborah Carr.
Yeah.
Burt Lancaster,
Mm-hmm.
and also my favorite male actor ever,
Mm-hmm.
Paul Newman.
Yeah, I know. I know you've. I know, going back to Deborah Carr for a minute. I know you bring up. You brought up Black Narcissus several times, and I'll admit I'll probably want to have you back to talk about that movie, because I saw it for the first time a few years ago, and I absolutely love that film. But yeah, I mean, Stanwyck here really does have a range, and I love, and all of those actors are just tremendous actors, just based on what I've seen of them. I mean, we'll get to Lancaster a little bit here too, because of the fact that he's in one of these films. But let's go ahead, and we're going to go in chronological order here as far as release order, and we are going to start with 1937 Stella Dallas. And this is a film from King Vidor, who was one of the great early pioneers of cinema. And he is basically working in melodrama here, as with Stanwyck as a working class woman wanting to do anything for her daughter. And I know this was one where when I watched it, you definitely see the melodrama really play out. And if you get the wrong tone, this just doesn't work, and it's hokey and it's ridiculous. And still has moments of that. But at the same time, you because of Stanwyck's performance, there's such an empathy for this character that is really just beautiful to watch.
Oh, definitely. It's a very transcendent performance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just watching her very, very loosely will herself into a well-off marriage, and then,
Mm-hmm.
and as she and not as she becomes a mother and is like, maybe and realizes that she has to be a good mother. It's just becomes so, yeah, it just becomes so fascinating, and even the fight, the final scene really sticks with me.
Yeah. No, I mean, and the thing that I love, so the thing that's so great about this film, I think, is because of the fact that it does start off with her character being one thing and then turning into something very different. When we first meet her character, she's very much, I mean, even throughout most of the movie, she's still very much interested in getting away from the life that she has with her family. She's very much, she feels like that she is bigger than the town that she's a part of. She feels like she needs to be a part of high society. And so that's where the marriage comes in. And then when she, like you said, when she gets pregnant, it kind of throws a wrench in what her plans are. And then at a certain point, though, she kind of realizes that, well, this is what life is, so how am I going to make the best of that?
Yeah, she realizes eventually she tries to find a happy medium between living the life she wants to live and trying to give her daughter the best life that she can.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, whenever after seeing Stella Dallas, I mean, I try not to compare classics to more modern films, but it gave me weird vibes of. I immediately thought of The Lost Daughter with Olivia Colman,
I can see
a
that.
similar character study about a mother struggling to fulfill her own needs and trying to give their give her children the life they deserve, even though Lita's a lit Olivia Colman's Lita's a little more prickly than Stella.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure even Stella wouldn't have a similar outburst in the movie theater
Mm-hmm.
as as Lita did.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things is I always think is striking is in that you don't really, I personally did not necessarily think about it until as the movie was progressing towards the ending, is that you have Stella who, has is trying to make her daughter Laurel, look glamorous and beautiful, and she wants her to be somebody who's noticed. And but at the same time, you look at what Stella's outfits are, and she doesn't dress nearly as elegantly as her daughter does, but in her mind is still very elegant, and you don't really get that impression. You don't really, me personally, I didn't really notice you don't really notice that until the moment where the teenagers that the kids that Laurel was with really start to mock Stella.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I noticed that either. I remember when I last saw it, I remember, yeah, the teenagers looking at sort of looking down at Stella and Stella trying to, and thinking that Stella is making a fool of her own daughter, but
Yeah.
the outfit thing I didn't really notice.
Yeah. It's there, but going to Stanwyck's performance in particular. I mean, we talked a little bit about the sympathetic side, but I mean, one of the things that I do love about this movie, like one of my favorite moments very early on in this film was her and Dallas at the movie, her and Steven at the movies when they're early on in their courtship. It's like there's just this radiance off of her watching the screen that is just and it's something that we see a lot in different we see a lot in different movies which have scenes in movie theaters. It's like that magic of movies and stuff like that. That magic of the experience of watching movies.
Yeah.
But I think Stella Dallas might be one of my favorite examples of that because it's not just about the movies. It's about Stella really embracing that this life that she's trying to build for herself with Steven and just kind of seeing the potential here.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. You know, this, and your comparison to the Lost Daughter is actually a very good one. I didn't think about it during my rewatch of it, but it does make a lot of sense because of the fact that it is very much in the same vein of Stella Dallas in terms of mothers and daughters and that, but it's like I almost feel like this is, even though this is very melodramatic. I mean, especially with the oh, what's the name of the what is the name of the older the other Ed, the Alan Hale character, who is basically around who's basically around Stella and you kind of get the impression is kind of partially responsible for the disillusion of her marriage to Steven. It's like that is such. There are so many things about that really just are kind of unnerving when you think about them today.
Yeah.
Where would you put Stella Dallas when it comes to in the, if you were to rank these four movies, where would you put this? Whether in terms of Stanwyck's performance or whether in terms of the film in general.
Well, performance-wise, I would say this is the best of her nominated performances.
I can see that.
Film-wise, I would say maybe third or second.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's kind of where I have it as far as film in general. Performance, I definitely see this as being. I can definitely see this being her best because I do think it gives her the most. I think it gives her the most versatility of all the roles in terms of showing a lot of her strengths, a lot of her personality as an actor. I definitely would. I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else that you want to say about Stella Dallas?
I think I'm good there.
Okay. All right. We're going to go to the next one. It is 1941's Ball of Fire, co-written by Billy Wilder and directed by the great Howard Hawks. This one is this one is very much a screwball film, and I think one of the things that is so amazing about it is that it is a screwball film about men working on an encyclopedia, which I never would have expected to be a premise that you could make interesting as a comedy, but when you have Stanwyck as a singer who's basically on the lam because her boyfriend, who's a gangster, is in trouble, I guess it makes a lot of sense that this could turn into hijinks. And I mean, honestly, it's like I think as much as I love Double Indemnity, I think this might be my favorite one to watch, and it's just because of the fact that it's very much a screwball comedy, and that's something that Hawks did very well when he did it, whether it's His Girl Friday and Bring Up Baby. And then you've got that script by Billy Wilder that just really develops all of the supporting characters just wonderfully well around Stanwyck.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments is the one where like as a sugar the character Sugar Puss O'Shea is bursting into dance with all the writers with all the professors.
Yeah.
The story shows that as she.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess that's one thing with this group. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So where the screwball elements come into play, where as she's hiding away from her boyfriend, sort of things sort of go awry because she's interrupting their serious plans.
Yeah. Well, and I do like this because of the fact that it's like Stanwyck is completely charming from the outset, and at first it's very much in the sort of in the vein of something a little along the lines of Femme Fatale and what we see in Double Indemnity, but at the same time, she's just immediately charming, gets into the screwball aspects of it, and I love the fact that this is and I was not surprised to learn that this was very deliberately modeled off of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because because as I was watching it, it's like this is very Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and sure enough, I was reading about it. It's like it's kind of riffed off of that, but I love this whole idea that she's a character that is bring the other people out of their skin and really inspiring them to, be a bit different, be a bit looser, and just not quite take things as seriously.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Night and the Seven Dwarfs because when I was scrolling through Wikipedia one time, I saw the character of Megara from Hercules was modeled after Barbara Stanwyck and her screwball comedy persona.
Huh.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Like from even Susan Egan's voice sort of emulates from the way Barbara Stanwyck speaks.
Okay, I haven't seen Hercules in a while, so I'll definitely need to check that out sometime. The thing that I think this is such a part of the reason this movie works for me so well is because of the fact that it's not only got great hook because of the fact that it's like these men have gotten to a point, and Gary Cooper's character in particular finds this garbage man who suddenly introduces them to new slang terms, and so that's something that he's kind of researching, and the fact that Sugar Puss O'Shea really will fit into that as she gets in deeper with the scholars it's just such a wonderful folding in of all of the different elements of this story. Although I will say it did strike me as very weird that the idea of an encyclopedia being a vanity project for somebody, it's like like do people really like commission encyclopedias to be done in the name of somebody? Isn't that just really struck me as weird, but otherwise, I mean, you go along with it just because of the way that Hawks and Wilder like basically keep things moving at brisk pace, and then just the cast in general is just absolutely
Yeah.
wonderful the way it plays out.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I do agree with what you say about her just being charming from the get-go.
Yeah.
I just love how even as she still fears that things won't work out between her and Gary Cooper. She's still like in her in her own Barbara Stanwyck way. She's like, we'll see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it'll work, but
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah. No, this was actually my first of the first time watches for me, and it was a great way to start off, and it really was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna enjoy these. I'm gonna enjoy going through these movies I hadn't seen, and plus, I mean, Howard Hawks is a filmmaker that I've been uh, wanting to play catch up on for a bit, and so this was another chance to watch one of his movies for the first time. What are some of your favorite screwball comedies?
uh, oh, good question. I like bringing up Baby.
Mm,
Don't know if it counts as really screwball, but Holiday,
okay,
the other uh, the other Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant movie from that year,
okay,
the Awful Truth with Irene Dunn,
mm-hmm.
who was nominated alongside Stanwyck for Stella Dallas.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorites is Arsenic and Old Lace with Cary Grant. But bringing up Baby is wonderful. I mean, we talked about it on the podcast last year, I believe, with in part of our established classic series, and yeah, I mean that was the thing that is remarkable about a filmmaker like Hawks is how the way that he can. I mean, Wilder's the same way. The way they can go from genre to genre, they can do slapstick comedy, they can do screwball comedy, but they can also do serious filmmaking, serious drama as well, and film noir. And I that is something that is very. I feel like we haven't seen that so much over the past decades of filmmaking. Kind of most filmmakers kind of stay in their lane to a certain extent. Like most of them don't really branch out into different genres the way other older filmmakers did.
Yeah, I mean, we do have Spielberg sort of
Yeah.
go, going from place to place, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and even Greta Gerwig, who's going from Little Woman to Barbie.
Yeah.
So, which I'm really excited for.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean Spielberg's definitely a good example, but I mean at the same time I would say with him like he hasn't done a huge amount of comedy over the years, like straight up comedy. I mean, most of his movies have some entertainment factor and some comedy
Yeah.
in them, but I mean, it's rare to see him do something that is basically done for laughs. I mean, it's like we have 1941, but I'm sorry, that's not that good of a movie. But I mean, I would also say Ron Howard is another example of that. I think he's somebody who's for the most part gone pretty successfully from genre to genre over the years. Um, and but yeah, Greg Gerwig is a good example, and I do think there are some. It's certainly not to say that every filmmaker does that, but yeah, I mean, it's like Greg Gerwig is a good example because you've got Lady Bird, which is basically coming of age film. You've got Little Women, which is literary adaptation. Then you've got Barbie, which is basically going to be silly kind of big budget comedy. And it's like that. It's gonna be interesting to see how that one succeeds. But yeah, it's
And also,
No, go ahead.
And also, so even though he's no longer with us, but Jonathan Demme, I think, was
Yeah.
another great example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with early Demi as I should be, but yeah, he was from everything I'm familiar with. Yeah, he is another excellent example of that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I definitely I'm guessing this is one of the ones that you have going back and forth with Stella Dallas in terms of 2 and 3 of these four.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's basic. I think I give it a slight edge over Stella Dallas just because of the fact that it's more outwardly funny, and I think there are some times where in Stella Dallas where the melodrama kind of gets the better of it to a certain extent, but um, you know, I would very much they're very much on a lot of the same along the same on the same level is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, we will continue with the one that I had seen and actually saved for today because I had seen it before, and it is 1944's Double Indemnity, co-written and directed by Billy Wilder. Is a one of the most famous of the 40s film noirs. It is Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray. And if you are familiar with Lawrence Kasdan's Body, it very much is inspired by this one up to a point. And one of the things that I've always been in, intrigued about with those two movies in particular, is the fact that they both found their own ways into this story and out of it in a way that are very compelling. But I mean, I do think I was rewatching it this morning and I remembered completely just from the opening where we first see McMurray start to talk into the recorder, uh, just why this is such a great film and the fact that the flashback structure works so well in this in telling this story of crime and lust.
Oh, definitely. And as for Barbara Stanwyck, I think even I guess like when she first enters, she's always just so in control of
Yeah.
in control of every frame she's in. Even when she's just when she's staring with her gazing with her glasses, she's
Mm-hmm.
still in in such utter control.
Yeah, I think that is really that is really a great credit to any great actor. That's a sign of any great actors, their ability to just command the frame regardless of what they're doing. I mean, I think this is and you really do see that in all of these films. I mean, we'll get to Sorry Wrong Number, but you know, like you said, from the second Stanwyck shows up, like she basically commands the screen. And she's in control of the situation too. Like she knows what she's doing, showing up, uh, you know, showing Walter Neff that like her the way she's dressed in that moment. Like she knows exactly what she's doing, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's just such a. I love that in both this and Ball of Fire she gets a chance to be very flirty, but I think one of the things I love and one of the things that probably uh, sh- Wilder realized he could get out of her by casting her in this is the fact that she's flirting a completely different way here than she was in Ball of Fire. Like she's very much in a comedic mode here in the earlier film, but here she's very icy and, like you said,
Yeah.
very very much in control.
Yeah, and also what's so genius about her performance is that with the way she holds her hands
Mm-hmm.
and gives that ominous stare, she's sort of it makes it clear she's got tricks up her sleeve, but she still sort of tiptoes the line between scheming the protagonist out of between want double cross the between feeling like she wants to double cross the protagonist, but
Mm-hmm.
also whether she wants and also trying to steal his heart.
Yeah. No, that is an excellent point. I mean, even the funny thing is, it's like the flashback structure is always fascinating to me, and the way that filmmakers approach it, because of the fact that, I mean, by especially this one with McMurray telling the story, we kind of feel like we are looking at it from his perspective, but then you have moments throughout the film where Stanwyck is the only one on screen, and it's basically from, like, when she comes to his apartment while Keys is there, and we see her on the outside. And I love that, but you don't think about it because of the fact that you're just so caught up in the narrative by that point, and you're so caught up with what these two characters are doing and trying to do. You look for moments that where you might be able to figure out where she's going, especially if you've watched it over again, if you've watched it more than once. If you've watched it more than once, it's something that well, can you tell that this is what? Sometimes you can tell certainly what she's trying to do, like you said, but on other times it's like, does do we see senses that she's got this other ulterior motive with meth that is later realized late in the film be, by Keys, where she's roping her stepdaughter's ex-boyfriend into it as well for her own gain, and basically saying Neff up to fail. And I
Yeah,
love that. That is one of the things that I love about rewatches on films like this.
yeah, I would agree with you there.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that going to some of the other performances here, one of the things I really noticed this time around in the dynamic between McMurray and Edward G. Robinson. Edward G. Robinson is somebody who's always searching for the truth. He's always trying to make sure he thinks he can get to the truth of any situation. But it seems like the way he approaches it is very slimy in his persona. But McMurray is very cool and he's dishonest all throughout most of this film. I personally, I don't know if you've noticed that, but that's something I noticed that was, it's a really interesting contrast between those two characters.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I guess I would agree that he does I guess he's Robinson does a fine job at being the kind of noir character who hints that he knows that the protagonist has a
Mm-hmm.
is a is getting his hands pretty filthy, but he doesn't. But he's just waiting for that big that big collapse.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, throughout this film, I mean, we see as the story unfolds. I love that we get this, the way this story unfolds. It really does bring into like this sense of just building dread, building tension, and it's like you instinctively, from a moral standpoint, we obviously would like to see them get their comeuppance, but at the same time, because of the fact that it's a movie, because of the fact that these two characters are main characters, you also want to see them, you know, get away with it together. And I think that's one of the things that Kasdan does so brilliantly in Body Heat, in leaning into what he leans into with this story, but with Wilder, and you kind of see it in some of his other films as well. There are times where he very much leans into the tragic hero angle, the tragic protagonist angle of it. I mean, you look at this, you look at Lost Weekend, you look at Sunset Boulevard, and I mean, you can see that he's very much he's not necessarily, he's a realist when it comes to how these type of protagonists end up in real life.
Yeah, you could even kind of see that in the noir films from that era, where even Leave Her to Heaven, which it doesn't really have a sad and I mean it doesn't have a happy ending, but more of a bitter. They have a happy ending, or it doesn't have a tragic ending, but still not entirely a happy one.
Mm-hmm.
Or the postman always rings twice.
Yeah.
Or Gilda, even the ones that didn't have sad or tragic endings still ended on would always end on a bittersweet note.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Probably because of the Hays Code, which always made it forbidden for any movies involving adulterous affairs to have happy endings.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. And I love, and that's one of the things that makes Wilder such an interesting filmmaker, and the way he told his stories, like in Sunset Boulevard, the way he would work towards breaking the, he very, very, not necessarily breaking the Hays Code, but at least subverting it enough to make things, to keep things interesting and to, get to some of those real places that, the Hays Code kind of almost didn't want you to go.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, this is by far. I mean, I'm sure you and I both have this as our number one as far as these four films.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's an all timer. I mean, it was just added to the Criterion Collection. It's an absolute must see, especially if you are a fan of some of Wilder's work. This is one that is absolutely essential. I mean, especially if you're a film noir fan, and this is one of the definitive examples of the genre. And
definitely.
So we are going to close of these four with 1948's Sorry, Wrong Number, based on a radio play, basically based on a radio play where Barbara Stanwyck plays a woman who is laid up in her bed and picks up the phone and hears something over the phone that implies that a murder is going to happen. It's a very familiar, if this is the type of story that Rear Window would later do from Hitchcock, and I mean other places, other films have done this as well. This is one. Burt Lancaster plays her husband, who kind of seems to who marries her, but doesn't really seem too terribly engaged with her. And I think that is, that really lays on the isolation that her character feels throughout the film.
Definitely. I do think the sort of one limited location, I think really it contributes to its claustrophobic feel.
Mm-hmm. And I was talking about flashbacks and double indemnity, but I have to say I do love the way that this film uses flashbacks as well to help tell the story and set up the premise um, of the fact that the why this couple was the way it is and what makes it kind of is what led Leona Stanwyck's character into this situation, or at least why she's uh, laid up, because it's very much something that she's, you know, as after a certain point we start to wonder, whether she truly is whether she truly is as sick as she seems to be.
And we also see just kind of how incompetent her husband is.
Yeah, yeah, and that was. And it's funny because of the fact that you look at the poster for this, and it looks like Lancaster is. It almost looks like Lancaster is somebody who's being set up. That character is being somebody who's setting up what's going to happen to the character. But when we get to the end, you're just not you we're not as certain about that. And
Right.
he's basically just a character who gets too deep into crime. So in kind of the same way, this is very familiar to this is kind of a film noir in with a possible murder mystery laced onto it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see where the noir elements come into play.
mm-hmm.
But and we know she's. I mean, she's not also. We know Leona is a completely different character from Phyllis.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. She's not in she's that, and that's one of the things that's part of the reason why this quartet of films was so interesting to go through, because of the fact that it shows Stanwyck is somebody who's very comfortable playing different forms of, different levels of control. Like she's completely in control in Double Indemnity, but in this one she doesn't have any control really at all.
Screaming like a banshee.
Not really. No.
Why?
And yeah, I think the way if I had one complaint, I do feel like the story does kind of drag and kind of gets a little too much into the melodrama, where I think King Vidor did a really good job maintaining a tone for the melodrama. In Stella Dallas, I think this one kind of leans a little too much into it overall.
What? Sell it. Sorry. What was that?
Oh no. What was saying? So basically, what was saying was, I do feel like the story kind of drags a little bit, and I also think the story gets a little too melodramatic as well. I don't think it maintains that same level of tone the same way something like Wait Until Dark later in the Audrey Hepburn thriller in the 60s does. I think that I kind of feel like this one, unlike I felt like Stella Dallas, when it came to melodrama, I felt like it maintained a very steady tone. I think this one, the tone kind of gets away from it to a certain extent.
Yeah, sorta. I mean, again, if anything, the limited setting is what it tries to help the movie maintain its psychological thriller elements, but
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like as we went into the flash, as we get the flashbacks that get further into Stanwyck and Lancaster's relationship. It's like, it's not. It we're losing a bit. It's like we're losing a bit of momentum here.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also the fact that, and I also think it's the fact that the more hysterical the film needs Stanwyck to be, I feel like it kind of goes a little too far into that kind of melodramatic, just losing control of things without really being able to maintain the sense of anxiety. I feel like she portrays extremely well at the start of the start of the film. I think she does a great job with vulnerability in the beginning of the film, but as it gets more and more, as it gets deeper and deeper into the larger plot, I think you kind of lose something in the performance. It's not necessarily Stanwyck's fault. It's just the fact that the filmmakers just couldn't really nail that tone, I think, the way that some of these other filmmakers did.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. That's probably what, out of all the movies she was nominated for, this one is ranks lowest for me.
Yeah.
Like it's a fun B movie thriller for like a Saturday night, but
Yeah. No,
and I get why she was nominated for it, because the movie doesn't work as well without her.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm very much with you. I mean, it's very much a B movie, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely my least favorite of the four films. But I mean, it's still a good movie, and I'm glad I got to see it, and I'm glad I got to see it in the context of her work in general, because of the fact that I do think there's a sense of vulnerability to her character in this that I don't really feel like, even in something like Stella Dallas, I don't necessarily feel like we see. I do feel like, to a certain extent, Stella Dallas, even when it comes to her realizing that she's kind of seen as a joke to her daughter's friends, she still has control over her daughter making the choice, that realizing that the choice that needs to be made is the right one.
Yeah. I mean, even though it means risking not seeing her daughter,
Yeah.
she still has to, like I said before, like find the happy medium between making sure she's happy while also trying to fulfill her own happiness, which is, I'm sure it's a common, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I'm sure it's a common struggle that parents have.
Yeah, I would imagine
But they,
as well.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, they always have to consider their own child's needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, especially I can't imagine what it's like. Especially, I can't imagine what it's like for single parents having to do that as well. You know, and this, the thing is, it's like, even the four films here, I think, this is one of the things that I find so interesting about watching older movies now, is that, so many of these movies we do hold up as just classic movies, and we think that, it's hard to imagine until you start to dig into Hollywood history. It's like, when you hear about these titles, you think, oh, these have to be great titles because they're ones that you've heard about and stuff like that, or they were nominated for Oscars. Well, I mean, not necessarily, because the Oscars then are basically the same as the Oscars now, where it's like they don't always get it right. And I mean, I would certainly say, I think certainly for the first three films that we talked about with Stanwyck, I would certainly say that it makes a lot of sense, and I can see why and appreciate why she got nominated for those three. I mean, you said that Sorry Wrong Number makes sense why she got nominated, and I agree with that as well. But at the same time, it's one of those nominations where it's like you kind of are left scratching your head. It's like, really, was that one of the top performances of that year? But
even though she was on her fourth try, it's like I don't mind her losing this one.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the winner that year was when she lost to Jane Wyman for Johnny Belinda, which is like, okay. The real best leading actress performance that year wasn't even nominated, so.
Yeah.
By that I mean Norma Shearer for The Red Shoes, but.
Yeah.
But Jane Wyman, like that's one I get.
Yeah.
And she is very good in Johnny Belinda, so.
But yeah.
But then again, yeah.
No, go ahead.
And then you have a case. Then you have something like Double Indemnity, where she had the misfortune of competing against another equally impressive performance, which was Ingrid Bergman for Gaslight, which is it's like, I guess I could take away Bergman's Oscar, but because Bergman has 3, but the other 2 that Bergman performances won for are not representative of her best work. So it's like,
yeah.
But I think that just goes to show why Stanwyck probably never won, because of competition, timing, flashier competition.
What are some other what are some other Stanwyck films that you would recommend people check out in addition to these 4?
Oh, definitely The Lady Eve. Definitely The Lady Eve, which is my as much as I love her in Ball of Fire, my favorite of her performances from that year. So, a work of sensual comedic genius. And also, I just got my Criterion DVD for that. Just came in the mail yesterday.
Okay.
So, definitely check. All I Desire, which came out 70 years ago, which feels it's right on the Criterion channel right now. I believe is leaving at the end of this month. So.
Oh, okay.
If you have that's like a perfect amalgamation of her previous work.
Okay.
Her knack for playing complicated mother figures like Stella and Stella Dallas, and also her romantic side that she's shown in her previous work. Her previous work, like The Lady Eve and Ball of Fire.
All right. Yeah, especially since All I Desire is a Douglas Sirk film, and that's a filmmaker I haven't quite gotten into. I might try to check that out in the next few days, since it's on Criterion. Yeah, I will, and obviously, and Lady Eve is another one that I need to get to as well. But yeah, Matthew, thank you very much for joining me. I'm glad we finally have been able to talk, and I do want to thank you for bringing this subject, because of the fact that I'm somebody who I have no problem. I love being able to watch new films for podcasts. It's like as much as I enjoy watching some of the films over that I talk about, watching something new, really I appreciate that, because of the fact that it's just a fun experience to learn something new about film.
Yeah, definitely. And I even watched some of before this podcast. I even watched some of her unnominated work to get a fuller idea of her
Yeah, yeah, and
of
this,
her
yeah, and this
of her
definitely
of her
does.
range.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's really, and it's funny because of the fact that it's like I don't necessarily. There are times where I'm not sure how accurate that is. Like if you get an actor who's been nominated for several Oscars, how representative of it is their range? I mean, I think there's several that you can say that. I think there are far more that you can say that about, but really sometimes the nominations are more representative of the Academy's taste more than the actor and their range, especially if they're nominated several times.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes the performances that the person is the kind of performance that someone is nominated for aren't as representative of their strong skill set as the performances they weren't recognized for. Like one great example is one example I would say is Deborah Carr, who we mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
who's been nominated 6 times, and she's great in the performances she was nominated for. But when I think of a great Deborah Carr's best work, I think Black Narcissus or The Innocents or
Mm-hmm.
Tea and Sympathy, Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, or Nicole Kidman. I think it's another great example.
Yeah.
Like how they nominate her for being the Ricardos, but not the Northman, Dogville, To Die For, Eyes Wide Shut.
Mm-hmm.
Her more daring, provocative work that really shows how great she can be.
Yeah. I absolutely adore Dogville. I thought she was wonderful in Dogville. So yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. But no, you're absolutely right. And I think that's and I definitely think that's something that I think that's especially when it comes to classic actors like Stanwyck. I think that's one of the things that Stanwyck I think is almost there are times where I would say Stanwyck to a certain extent based on these four performances might be an outlier in terms of their Academy Award nominated work being a really good representation of their work in general. Um, but aside from stuff that they did that is more adventurous, and you mentioning Kidman, that's an excellent example because yeah, I mean, I don't even know anybody who necessarily feels like being the Ricardos is representative of Nicole Kidman or in her best, and it's really kind of disheartening to see her nominated for that, but like you said, not for like Eyes Wide Shut or To Die For, but yeah, if where can you mentioned you have a newsletter? Where can people find that?
Oh, it's on Substack, called Cinematic Words of a Chaotic Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just did my own a few words on the 95th Academy Awards, which happened a few weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
to wrap up the ceremony and the winners.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. I mean, and check out his Substack. It's always a good read, and yeah, I was going talking a little bit about the we'll go a little bit about the Oscars. Overall, it's like this is one of those. This is probably the first year in a while. I feel like there's not a whole lot that I can overly complain about. I feel like for the most part, the choices were very good ones. And I don't know, it's weird. I feel a bit uncomfortable with that because of the fact that I'm so used to being upset with the Academy's choices.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I thought the winners were pretty solid. I mean, I'm pretty mixed on Brendan Fraser winning for The Whale. Because I like Brendan Fraser, but I do wish that he won for a better comeback vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And even Clair on the Western Front winning Best Score, which okay.
as, 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 as a composer who is obsessed with best original score, yeah, I was not a fan of that win at all.
Yeah.
It was yeah. I mean, it's okay. It's not a terrible one, but at the same time, it's not my least favorite all time score win, but it's not far from it because there were some genuinely genuinely great scores nominated this year that didn't get wins that I would have liked to have seen. But yeah, it's yeah. I mean, it's. I think that's one of the things about the Oscars that is always kind of fascinating is the fact that it's like seeing what they. I mean, I it's like I'm somebody who nominally was a fan of The Whale, but I completely respect why people are not fans of it. I understand why people are not fans of it. And and it's funny because the episode after this, we're talking about Darren Aronofsky, and we are talking about The Whale. So you'll get my discussion on The Whale next episode. But I mean, I know one of the ones that got people up in arms was Jamie Lee Curtis winning for Everything Everywhere All at Once. I mean, especially I get it, especially with Stephanie Sue not winning. Because I do think she was by far the best of those two performances from Everything Everywhere All at Once. But at the same time, I mean, it's like, you know what?
It's not a bad performance.
It's not bad performance. I mean, seeing Jamie Lee Curtis win for something that unusual of a performance that gives her a lot of different things to do, you can't really argue with that considering some of the performances that do win.
Yeah, and also the fact that a lot of her Oscar-worthy work has come from genre movies.
Yeah.
For her to win an Oscar for a genre movie, I think is pretty.
No, it's.
I mean, I don't want to begrudge seeing an actress whose work I've admired since childhood getting her big moment.
Yeah.
Like, sure, I would have gone with maybe Stephanie Sue or Carrie Condon from Banshees of Inisherin, but I don't mind Curtis winning too much.
Yeah. No, I mean it's one of those ones where it's like, yeah, you think about it in terms of the nominees, and it's like, yeah, you can poke some holes in it, but ultimately speaking, I mean, like you, it's Jamie Lee Curtis. Like I've been watching her since childhood. It's like I'm happy for her to win. So it's I can't get too upset about it. And like you said, it's for genre, which I mean, they don't do a whole lot of genre appreciation. So
yeah, and I'm sure Angela Bassett's losing reaction is another thing that gets people about Jamie. Like I mean, who knows if she's gonna get another chance like that? And who knows if that?
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely true, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, you're very much right on that, and it's like, but at the same time, it's like, do you really want to see Angela Bassett win for a Marvel movie? Really? But then again, they gave it to Joaquin Phoenix for a DC movie, so
yeah,
I'm not sure how I feel about that one either, especially since he was passed over for some truly phenomenal work this past decade. But
definitely.
Yeah. No, but Matthew, thank you very much for joining me. I'm glad we've
Thanks for having me.
Finally been able to talk and to have this conversation.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be on.
I'd like to thank Matthew for joining me on the podcast, and I'd like to thank Matthew for giving me a chance to see some classic films that I have not seen in a while, and it's one of those things where, like I told him in episode, I love being introduced to new movies and new classic movies that I haven't seen before, and this one really gave me an opportunity to, and so I do want to thank him for that. And I've already told him I definitely want to have him on again to talk some more classic movies, because I'm excited about that. That's going to be it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema podcast. The next episode, as I kind of teased in this episode, is going to be with a favorite filmmaker of mine as we discuss the work of Darren Aronofsky. And also, I've got some other great discussions coming up. Some return guests, some guests being on for the first time. We're gonna have some more classic movies, some films I'm not familiar with, some that I very much am, and I'm really looking forward to all these conversations. Check us out once again at patreon.com/SonicCinema. There's a lot of great content there, and also check me out at the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. Wherever you listen to podcasts, click subscribe, rate, and review, and as well as my reviews at www.sonic-cinema.com. Thank you.